This week on Africa Weekly, we head to Cape Town, where residents are praying for the end to a 2-year drought. Then we visit Tunisia, where the country's health service is suffering from corruption and mismanagement. And finally, we end in Mozambique, where Africa's longest suspension bridge is under construction at an eye-watering cost of $750 million. But first, here's a summary of the stories that made the headlines this week. Thousands demonstrated in northern Morocco demanding the release of Nasser Zefzafi, the leader of a popular movement in the neglected Rif region. Initial protests in October triggered a wider movement railing against corruption and unemployment. Zefzafi was arrested after 3 days on the run and, according to prosecutors, will be investigated for undermining the security of the state. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta inaugurated a Chinese-built railway, the country's biggest infrastructure project since independence, that's aimed at cementing its role as the gateway to East Africa. President Kenyatta, Chinese dignitaries and citizens from all over the country piled onto the train's maiden journey from Mombasa to Nairobi. Police used tear gas to disperse a protest by around 2,000 people demanding Guinea-Bissau's President Jose Maria Vaz resign. The crowd marched on the presidential palace from Bissau Airport to demand an end to almost 2 years of political deadlock. The country's next legislative elections are scheduled for next year. Shops, schools and businesses shut in southeast Nigeria 50 years to the day since an independent republic of Biafra was declared. The rebel province declared independence on the 30th of May 1967, triggering a bitter civil war that left more than 1 million people dead. Separatist sentiment still persists in the region dominated by the Igbo people, with Civil War veterans marking the anniversary by singing their former anthem, The Land of the Rising Sun. Nnamdi Kanu is another savior. Lesotho heads to elections on Saturday in the country's second snap poll in 3 years as political instability deepens. This comes after a vote of no confidence sank Prime Minister Pakalita Moselisi's government in March. Lesotho's former Prime Minister Thomas Thabane is heading up the country's ABC party and spoke confidently ahead of the vote.
We're going to win this election. If it's free and fair, we'll win it. If we don't win it, there'll be something wrong. I can assure you of that.
The holy Muslim month of Ramadan began with believers all over Africa observing the religious period. It began with a bitter taste for residents of Libya's capital as cash shortages hit and deadly clashes returned. In Khartoum, residents broke the fast on the first day of Ramadan by enjoying the traditional dish asida in the street with their neighbours and passers-by.
A desert where there once was water. This is South Africa's Theewaterskloof Dam, the main source of water for Cape Town. But levels have plummeted after over 2 years of persistent drought.
At about 100%, the water comes up to this area. And as you can see, this is the current situation.
There is currently just over 10% of usable water in Cape Town's dams. Exposed moorings at the local water sports club bear testimony to just how far levels have dropped.
I've worked here for about 20 years and I've never ever seen a dam this low.
Cape Town has declared the drought a disaster and introduced harsh restrictions. Residents can use up to 100 litres a day, but only for drinking, cooking and essential cleaning. At one natural spring in the city, residents line up during their lunch break to fill water bottles.
We're just relying on a miracle at the moment. There's no sign of rain coming, so we just got to pray.
The city is looking at alternate sources of water, but says in the meantime, residents simply have to cut back.
In terms of international best practice, the best mechanism to manage a drought effectively is to manage one's demand, which is what we are doing. But that doesn't mean we have not thought about the supply side.
Strong summer rains have seen much of southern Africa recover from the El Nino-induced drought. But Cape Town receives most its rain in winter, and scientists say there's no guarantee of a good wet season.
It takes a good 3 years to fill a dam to overflowing, especially the big dams. Unlikely that our dams will fill. Best case scenario is they get to 60-70%. More than that, we'd be very, very lucky. But even if we get to 60 to 70%, that leaves us in more or less the same position we are this time next year.
The city is planning to drill into mountain aquifers and is also looking to build 2 desalination plants. With climate change models predicting a warmer and drier Cape Town, the city's water worries are far from over.
Decrepit walls, faulty equipment, run-down furniture. This is a typical public hospital in Tunis. Haj Mahmoud is a cancer patient and he's been waiting for a doctor's appointment for days.
Here poor people cannot live. There is so much to say. Nobody listens to us. I am tired.
Ever since its independence, Tunisia's governments have been known to make improving health services a priority. But since the 1990s, reports show corruption and mismanagement have set the sector back, a situation that worsened after the 2011 revolution. According to the Health Ministry, public hospitals' debts amounted to more than $200 million last year.
After the revolution, we registered projects that we are unable to put in place. We also built structures that aren't functioning for lack of human resources or equipment, or because these services were closed and forgotten about.
The poor conditions also put a strain on the medical staff, who grapple with disgruntled patients, dysfunctional equipment, and critical understaffing.
Every day we have problems. Every day. At the very minimum, it's a verbal aggression, even though we try to talk to them with respect.
In the provinces, the situation is even worse than in the capital. But because of the high costs of private clinics, most Tunisians have to make do with often inadequate conditions.
For several weeks, Maputo has taken on a San Francisco vibe. The construction of the longest suspension bridge in Africa, in the Mozambican capital, is well underway. Due to open at the end of the year, it will link the city's densely populated north bank with Katembe, an undeveloped fishing village. The project's backers hope that the new bridge will help the capital grow towards the south, boosting the region's tourism.
The south extreme of Maputo is one of the very unique places in the world where you can have a beach, you have the bush, so you can have game reserve, bird viewing, you know, we have lions and elephants around here.
The bridge is 3 kilometers long and suspended 60 meters above the water. The project is led by a Chinese company and financed by a Chinese loan. But the high cost of the bridge, more than $750 million, has been criticized by local activists.
This is really no numbers. You're making a bridge for maybe 100, 200 cars a day on each side. 750 million? Do you know how many schools we can build with that? Do you know how many hospitals we can build with that?
Mozambique is deeply in debt, worsened by a government spending spree following the discovery of oil and gas deposits. The country borrowed heavily in the hope of receiving a windfall from those resources. But those who will use the bridge are delighted.
Yes, the cost is very high, but thanks to the bridge and the road, there will be more development. We can't do anything without a road. You first have to have a road to build hospitals and schools.
For years, locals like Pedro have been forced to wait hours to take an old ferry that often breaks down. Thanks to this multi-million-dollar bridge, it will take just minutes to cross the bay.
Grand Bassam Stadium held the ECOWAS Grand Prix horse race, a 2,400-metre race drawing huge crowds for an event hosted by a country of horse racing fans. Next week on Africa Weekly, we visit South Africa, where violence has gripped townships as residents protest over lack of employment, shortages of electricity and water, and substandard education and healthcare. That's all from us at Africa Weekly. Until next week.